Hi guys, it's been a little minute since we looked at some Japanese whiskey, and I do find it's a really interesting category to actually just understand some of the terms that we use in whiskey in general. So I thought I would bring a few in here. So these are all from Nikka, the Nikka distilleries. It was Masataka Taketsuru who actually went to Scotland to learn how to distill. Worked at a few different distilleries there, actually met his wife who was a Scottish woman who moved back to Japan with him, which is a lovely love story. And when he came back, he started making whiskey in that kind of Scottish style. It's actually kind of not really the whiskey that Japan's ended up being known for. It's actually known a lot more for their blends. So the Japanese palate actually found that kind of single malt quite heavy and full on, and so a lot of Japanese whiskies that you will see nowadays that you might know, like the Nikka from the Barrel or Hibiki Harmony and so on, they are actually technically blended whiskey. So what does that mean? Well, single malt, which is obviously something that people, like to just order quite a lot, but it's actually a really broad range of things and is also not a phrase, the two words actually mean something different within that. So the single part means that it's distilled at one single distillery, and then the malt part means that it is made from 100% malted barley. So you've also got a few different styles here. So the only one that I have here that's actually a single malt is the Yoichi, which is made at the Yoichi distillery in Hokkaido. We've also got this little Taketsuru, which is named for the man himself, and that is a blend from the two different distilleries. So they've got Yoichi, but also Miyagikyo. They make kind of different styles of whiskey there. So the Taketsuru is the best of both worlds, but it doesn't have any grain whiskey in there, so it's technically a blended malt whiskey, or what in Japan is often labelled as a pure malt. And then you've got these little guys. So your Nikka from the Barrel is a more classic blended whiskey, which means that it's a mix of both malted barley from both of these distilleries, but also actually contains quite often some whiskey from Scotland as well. The Nikka, or the parent company here, actually own the Ben Nevis distillery in Scotland as well. And it also will have some grain whiskey in there. Now, Japan has tightened up its rules a little bit because there was a lot of people just basically buying whiskey purely from Scotland, shipping it to Japan, sticking it in a bottle with some, Japanese writing on it and trying to ride that wave. The Nikka one has always had some Japanese whiskey, but yeah, they're very upfront about the fact that it's a blend from both of their Japanese distilleries with some grain whiskey in there as well, and also some Scottish. And then your coffee grain whiskey. This one's quite interesting. So coffee, not as in the thing that wakes you up in the morning. So it's Coffey, and it's named for Aeneas Coffey, who really perfected a type of still which is called the coffee still or the column still. These are much bigger than the more traditional little pot stills that you might have sort of seen, that are the little kind of fat guys. And those continuous stills have really, modernized distilling in general. They run continuously, and you can make a much bigger volume on there, but it is generally a bit of a lighter, brighter spirit type, whereas the pot stills tends to give that bit more kind of heft and depth, for reasons that I have gone into in another video where we actually looked at rum. So I'll pop that little link up here if you were interested in getting a little bit more science and nerdy. So this one is grain whiskey, so won't have been made from malted barley, but from other grains, usually wheat. So we might start with this one because theoretically it should be your sort of lightest. And so this is essentially what will then be blended into here to make this a blended whiskey, if that makes sense. And yeah, it's gonna happen. So if we look at these guys side by side, the coffee one is quite bright, like quite a lot of kind of more citrus notes. It doesn't really necessarily jump out the glass as much. It doesn't smell as sort of weighty. But still has a lot of really nice kind of grain character. Would definitely work well in mixed drinks or something like a highball. That's kind of what this style of whiskey is for. You can absolutely sip it neat. It's not the most interesting in the world, being perfectly honest. You're not getting kind of all the different layers of flavour and so on that you do tend to get in those aged single malts, but still a very nice sipper. And then the Nikka from the Barrel is going to have a little portion of this and also a blend of some single malts as well, so you'd be expecting a little bit more complexity. So yeah, a little bit rounder and richer. That one actually has a tiny hint of peat in there. Definitely not, you know, any kind of big peat bomb, but it is there and present, which again adds just like another little extra layer of flavour. Again, still pretty easygoing. This is definitely one that we have sitting on our shelf for just sort of nights when you don't feel like being too challenged. It's just quite a comforting one to come back to, and isn't too expensive as well compared to a lot of Japanese whiskey. It's obviously still going to cost you a bit. There's not really any bargains to be had there, but definitely a good option to try something without maybe having to expend quite as much. Then we go into the Taketsuru. This is one of my all-time favorite Japanese whiskeys. I think it has that really lovely kind of delicate and more floral aspect and flavor that is maybe why Japanese whiskey does tend to appeal to a lot of people. It's very easygoing, but still has lots going on. If you like maybe more of a kind of lighter style Speyside or that sort of honey and shortbread sort of vibe that you get in a lot of Scottish whiskies, this is definitely going to be a good option for you to try. But yeah, it does still have like a little bit of saltiness at the end there. Definitely lots going on. And then we'll go into the Yoichi. So the idea with having the two different distilleries is that gives Nikka a fair amount of things to play with. So they do try and make quite different styles of whiskey at the two. The Miyagi-Kyo does tend to be that more Speyside, light, bright and fruit driven. And the Yoichi is actually a little bit peated. It's definitely not as full on as if you're looking at an Islay Scotch or something like that, but has a little bit more of that kind of grunt that you might expect from some single malts. Quite a bready kind of baking, I guess, yeah, smells like you're baking something in the oven when you stick your nose straight in the glass. Really lovely, round, quite creamy, almost kind of lemon curdy, and then yeah, it does have that little hint of smoke. So it's actually one that I quite like to show people because I think sometimes people think of Japanese whiskey as only being, you know, one thing, when actually there's quite a range within Japan and even within from, you know, individual producers. So definitely a fun one to, you know, trick your friends to be like, where do you think this one is from? Because I would say almost maybe like a Campbelltown whiskey or something, that little bit lemon curd creaminess and that little bit of peat smoke. So still quite delicate and refined, but not shy. Delicious Japanese whiskey. So now you know.